Footsteps echoed against the cold cobblestones of Castle Sullivan, heavy with unspoken secrets. A weary king sought peace in the dark stables, only to find an impossible sight. A frail maid asleep in the hay, guarded fiercely by a massive, pregnant timber wolf. It was a discovery that would tear the kingdom apart. Heavy iron gates slammed shut, echoing through the expansive courtyards of the kingdom of Okerhaven. King Cedric Sullivan had returned, a ruler whose name struck fear into the hearts of rival territories. Cedric was not merely a medieval monarch. He was the Alpha King. His bloodline carried the ancient curse and blessing of the lycanthrope, returning from a grueling 3-month border campaign against rogue factions. Cedric's armor was heavily dented, his broad shoulders weighed down by the endless responsibilities of his crown. His men celebrated their victory in the great hall, their booming laughter and the clashing of mead goblets bleeding through the thick stone walls. Yet Cedric felt nothing but an overwhelming hollow exhaustion. He sought the only place where the suffocating demands of the court could not reach him, the royal stables. The air grew significantly cooler as he walked down the dimly lit stone paths. The pungent, earthy smell of damp hay, rich soil, and horse musk usually grounded him. Cedric carried a single flickering torch, its orange light dancing across the wooden beams. He intended to check on his massive war horse, a beast named Goliath, before retiring to his empty chambers. However, as Cedric pushed open the heavy oak doors of the eastern stable block, his enhanced senses caught something entirely out of place. Beneath the familiar scent of oats and leather, there was a delicate, intoxicating fragrance, like crushed lavender and wild pine after a heavy storm. But underlying it was something far more dangerous, the distinct, musky scent of a wild wolf mixed with the metallic tang of dried blood. Cedric's spine stiffened. His golden eyes flared in the darkness, the beast within him instantly rising to the surface, demanding dominance. A rogue wolf within the castle walls was a direct threat, a lethal breach of his fortress's security. He drew his broadsword, the steel hissing softly against the leather scabbard, and advanced with predatory silence. He followed the scent to the furthest stall, an abandoned enclosure meant for storing winter feed. The torchlight breached the shadows, and Cedric froze. The breath left his lungs in a sharp exhale. Curled in the corner of the stall was a young woman. She was clad in the tattered, oversized tunic of a low-ranking stable hand, her hands calloused and smeared with dirt. Her long, dark chestnut hair cascaded over her face in a messy tangle, hiding her features as she slept deeply on a bed of raw straw. But it was not the sleeping girl that made the Alpha King stop in his tracks. Standing directly over her, positioning its massive body as a living shield, was a timber wolf. The beast was enormous, easily reaching the height of a grown man's chest. Its fur was a mottled silver and deep ash, thick and bristled with aggression. A low, rumbling snarl vibrated from the wolf's throat, bearing teeth that could easily snap a human femur in half. Cedric's gaze drifted downward. The wolf's belly was swollen, heavy with a late-stage pregnancy. She was exhausted, favoring one heavily scarred hind leg. Yet her golden eyes burned with an unyielding maternal ferocity. She was ready to die to protect the fragile human sleeping beneath her. As the Alpha King, Cedric possessed an aura that forced lesser wolves to their bellies in submission. He projected his dominance, his golden eyes flashing with raw authority. "Submit," his aura commanded. The pregnant wolf trembled, her primal instincts battling the overwhelming pressure of his alpha command. Whimpering softly, she lowered her head, but she absolutely refused to step away from the girl. She nudged the sleeping maiden's shoulder with her wet nose, a protective, desperate gesture. Cedric lowered his sword. The hostility drained from him, replaced by profound confusion. A wild, pregnant, rogue wolf taking a human as her charge. It defied every law of their kind. The commotion stirred the girl. Rowena Caldwell gasped, her eyes flying open as the harsh torchlight blinded her. For the past 6 months, she had lived a ghost's existence. Once the beloved daughter of Lord Thomas Caldwell, a nobleman who had been falsely accused of treason and executed, Rowena had been stripped of her title and wealth. To survive the brutal winter and the assassins sent by her treacherous uncle, Richard Buckley, she had disguised herself as a boy and taken the lowest job in the castle stables. She had found the silver wolf 3 weeks ago, caught in a poacher's iron trap in the Whispering Woods, bleeding and near death. Unable to leave a pregnant mother to die, Rowena had smuggled the beast into the castle, stealing scraps from the kitchen, and treating the wolf's wounds with stolen herbs. Rowena scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the rough wooden planks of the stall. Her heart hammered against her ribs as her vision cleared, revealing the towering figure of the king. He was a terrifying sight, standing well over 6 feet, clad in dark leather and chainmail, his face scarred and shadowed, wielding a naked blade. "Mercy, your grace," Rowena whispered, throwing herself forward to shield the wolf with her own frail body. "Please do not kill her. She means no harm. She is only a mother." Cedric stepped closer, planting the torch into a wall bracket. As he looked down at Rowena, the scent of lavender and pine hit him with the force of a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis. The roaring of his inner beast, which had been aggressive moments before, suddenly morphed into a deafening possessive purr. "Mate." The realization shattered Cedric's composure. The gods had a twisted sense of humor. The Alpha King, who had searched the continent for a noble Luna to stand by his side, had just found his fated mate dressed in rags, sleeping in horse manure, fiercely guarding a pregnant rogue wolf. Cedric stood paralyzed, his chest heaving, as he fought the overwhelming urge to drop to his knees and pull the terrified woman into his arms. The mate bond was a legendary, undeniable force among their kind, an ancient magic that bound 2 souls together. Yet Cedric was a king seasoned by war. He knew better than to act on raw impulse, especially when the political climate of Oak Haven was a powder keg. "Stand up," Cedric commanded, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that left no room for defiance. Rowena hesitated, her hands trembling as she patted the silver wolf's snout to calm the beast. Slowly she rose to her feet. Without the shadows concealing her, Cedric saw the aristocratic bone structure beneath the dirt, the sharp jawline, the intelligent, fearful hazel eyes. "What is your name?" he asked, clear as throat, stepping into the stall. The pregnant wolf watched him warily, but no longer bared her teeth, sensing the sudden shift in the alpha's intent. "Rowena, sire," she murmured, keeping her head bowed. I am just a stable hand. Please punish me if you must, but spare the creature." Cedric's eyes narrowed. "You smell of nobility, Rowena, not of the peasantry, but we shall leave that mystery for another hour." He knelt slowly, deliberately, placing his sword on the ground to show he meant no harm. He extended a large, calloused hand toward the silver wolf. Rowena held her breath as the massive beast sniffed the king's fingers. To her absolute shock, the wolf let out a soft, mournful whine and pressed her head into Cedric's palm. As Cedric touched the wolf's fur, a jolt of recognition struck him. He leaned in closer, inhaling the specific scent beneath the blood and dirt. It was faint, masked by the forest and the stables, but it was unmistakably familiar. The scent of pine needles, crushed wintergreen, and a hint of iron. "By the gods," Cedric breathed, his face paling. He looked at the swollen belly of the beast. "Do you know her, sire?" Rowena asked, bewildered. "She is not a rogue," Cedric said, his voice laced with sudden lethal fury. "This is Lady Vivian. She was the mate of my younger brother, Lord Arthur." Rowena gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The entire kingdom knew the tragic tale of Lord Arthur Sullivan. He and his newly bonded mate had reportedly been ambushed and slaughtered by human bandits on the southern road 4 months ago. "She survived," Cedric whispered, reverently stroking the wolf's ears. "And the pup she carries. It is my brother's heir. Royal blood." The implications hit Cedric like a battering ram. If Vivian had survived the ambush and was hiding in the woods instead of returning to the castle, it meant the attackers were not random human bandits. It meant the threat came from within his own pack. Someone inside Castle Sullivan had orchestrated the assassination of his brother and was likely still hunting Vivian to eliminate the heir. And Rowena, a banished noblewoman hiding in his stables, was the only thing standing between his brother's legacy and death. Before Cedric could formulate a plan, the heavy stable doors creaked open. The rhythmic clanking of armored boots echoed down the corridor. "Your Grace," called a smooth, aristocratic voice. "Are you in here? The council seeks your presence in the Great Hall." It was Lord Alaric Harrington, Cedric's captain of the guard and his most trusted advisor. Alaric was a striking man, with silver blonde hair and cold, calculating blue eyes. He had been the one to find Arthur's destroyed carriage months ago. He had been the one to bring the tragic news. The silver wolf immediately reacted to Alaric's voice. She let out a panicked, guttural snarl, her body trembling violently as she tried to wedge herself behind Rowena. Cedric's blood ran cold. The wolf's reaction was all the proof he needed. The traitor was right outside the stall. "Stay quiet," Cedric hissed to Rowena, grabbing a large tarp and throwing it over the shivering wolf, hiding her in the deep shadows of the corner. He grabbed Rowena by the shoulders, his golden eyes boring into hers. "Do not speak a word of what you know. Your life depends on it." Cedric stepped out of the stall just as Alaric rounded the corner, holding a lantern. The captain paused, his eyes darting to the dirty, trembling girl standing behind the king. My king? Alaric said smoothly, bowing his head. I did not mean to intrude. Have you found trouble in the stables? No trouble, Alaric. Cedric lied seamlessly, stepping into the captain's line of sight to block his view of the stall. Merely a thief I caught this boy stealing from the royal feed. Alaric sneered, looking Rowena up and down. A thief? Shall I have the guards drag him to the dungeon, sire? A few days in the dark will teach him not to steal from the king, no? Cedric replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. I am weary of bloodshed today. I will handle this one myself. I need a new personal servant for my private chambers. This rat will serve me confined to my quarters to pay off the debt of theft. Alaric blinked, clearly surprised by the uncharacteristic mercy of the Alpha King. As you wish, sire. Though I must say, an experienced maid would serve you better than a filthy stable boy. My word is law, Alaric. Return to the hall. Tell the council I have retired for the night. Alaric bowed again, though his cold eyes lingered suspiciously on the shadows of the stall, before he turned and departed. Once the heavy doors shut, Cedric turned back to Rowena. Pack whatever meager belongings you have, he commanded softly. We must move Vivian to my chambers immediately. From this moment on, you are no longer a stable hand. You are my personal ward. If Alaric discovers who you are, or what you are hiding, he will kill you both. Rowena looked at the towering Alpha, realizing she had just been pulled from the mud and thrown directly into the deadliest political war in the kingdom. But as she looked at the top, knowing the pregnant mother underneath was relying on her, she lifted her chin. I am ready, my king. The ascent to the royal wing was a perilous, shadow-drenched journey. King Cedric led Rowena and the limping pregnant wolf through a labyrinth of forgotten servants' corridors and secret passageways built into the thick stone walls of Castle Sullivan. The air was stale, thick with dust and ancient cobwebs, but it shielded them from the prying eyes of Lord Alaric Harrington's guards. When they finally emerged from behind a heavy tapestry into the king's private chambers, Rowena let out a breath she felt she had been holding for an eternity. The room was vast and opulent, warmed by a roaring fire in a massive stone hearth. Heavy velvet drapes shielded the tall windows, and furs were scattered across the polished oak floor. Bring her to the hearth, Cedric instructed, his voice low and urgent. He stripped off his heavy chainmail and leather braces, tossing them carelessly onto a grand armchair. Rowena gently guided Lady Vivian to a thick pile of bearskins near the fire. The silver wolf collapsed instantly, her breathing ragged and shallow. Her golden eyes darted nervously around the room until Cedric knelt beside her, releasing a low, soothing rumble from his chest, an alpha's promise of protection. Only then did the beast rest her heavy head on her paws. Cedric turned his attention to the woman standing awkwardly in the center of his chambers. Covered in soot, mud, and horsehair, Rowena looked wildly out of place amidst the royal finery. Yet, as Cedric looked at her, his wolf howled with absolute devotion. The mate bond, ancient and undeniable, pulled at his very soul. There is a bathing room through that door, Cedric said softly, gesturing to an adjoining chamber. Clean yourself. In the carved chest at the foot of the bed, you will find garments belonging to my late mother. They should fit you. Thank you, Your Grace, Rowena whispered, her hazel eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Cedric, he corrected gently. When we are behind these doors, you will call me Cedric. An hour later, Rowena re-emerged. The grime of the stables had been washed away, revealing skin like polished porcelain, and a cascade of thick chestnut hair that caught the firelight. She wore a simple, deep crimson gown of spun wool, unadorned but elegant. Cedric felt the breath leave his lungs. She was breathtaking. The aristocratic grace she had tried to bury beneath the mud was now undeniable. He poured 2 goblets of spiced wine and handed her one. Now, Lady Rowena Caldwell, daughter of the executed Lord Thomas Caldwell, tell me how you ended up shoveling manure in my stables. Rowena's hands trembled around the silver goblet. She took a sip, letting the warmth fortify her. My father was innocent, Cedric. He did not conspire with the northern rebels. My uncle, Richard Buckley, forged the treasonous letters. He wanted my father's lands, his wealth, and his title. When my father was executed, Uncle Richard sent his mercenaries to slaughter me in the night, so there would be no rightful heir to challenge his claim. I escaped into the whispering woods, cut my hair, and hid in the only place I knew he would never look, the mud of your fortress. Cedric's jaw clenched, his golden eyes flashing with a dangerous predatory light. The puzzle pieces were violently snapping together. Richard Buckley. Cedric growled the name, tasting like ash on his tongue. Buckley has been closely aligned with Captain Alaric Harrington for the past year. If Buckley orchestrated your father's death to gain power in the East, then Alaric orchestrated your brother's ambush to weaken the throne. Rowena finished, her eyes widening in horror. They are working together. Alaric takes the crown, and my uncle takes the eastern territories. A sudden, agonizing whimper shattered the tense silence. Rowena and Cedric spun around. By the hearth, Lady Vivian was thrashing weakly on the furs. Her silver coat was soaked with sweat, and her breathing had turned into rapid, shallow pants. The stress of the Alpha's command, the terror of sensing Alaric in the stables, and the arduous climb up the secret stairs had triggered her body. The pup, Rowena gasped, dropping her goblet. It clattered against the stone floor, spilling crimson wine like blood. She is going into labor. I must summon a physician, Cedric said, striding towards the heavy oak doors. No. Rowena lunged forward, grabbing his arm. The physical contact sent a jolt of pure electricity through them both. But the urgency of the moment overshadowed the mate bond. You cannot. If you call a physician, Alaric will know someone is in your chambers. He controls the castle guard. We will be trapped. I know nothing of midwifery, Rowena, let alone for a shifting wolf, Cedric argued, his voice laced with rare panic. I do, Rowena said fiercely, her hazel eyes locking onto his golden ones with unwavering resolve. I have delivered foals in the stables, and I have treated her wounds for weeks. We have to do this ourselves. Fetch me hot water, clean linens, and a sharp knife. Now, for the first time in his reign, the Alpha King followed orders without hesitation. The next 3 hours were a grueling test of endurance. The opulence of the king's bedchamber transformed into a frantic triage. Rowena knelt in the bloodied furs, murmuring soothing praises to the agonizing wolf, her hands working with desperate precision. Cedric stayed by Vivian's head, radiating his calming alpha aura to keep the mother from slipping into shock. As the castle bells tolled the 3rd hour of the morning, a final agonizing howl ripped from Vivian's throat. Rowena caught the tiny wet bundle in the warm linens Cedric provided. She worked quickly to clear the airway and cut the cord. The room fell into a terrifying, suffocating silence. Rowena rubbed the bundle frantically. Then a piercing, healthy cry echoed through the chamber. Cedric let out a shuddering breath, a tear escaping his golden eyes. It was not a wolf pup, but a human infant. The lichen gene would remain dormant until puberty. The boy had a tuft of striking silver hair, the exact shade of his mother's fur, and his father's eyes. Arthur's heir had survived. Vivian, exhausted and trembling, shifted back into her human form. She was a frail, breathtaking woman with pale skin and silver hair. Cedric quickly covered his naked sister-in-law with a thick fur mantle. Vivian reached out weakly, and Rowena placed the crying infant onto her chest. "Arthur." Vivian sobbed, burying her face into her newborn son's neck. "My sweet boy." Cedric turned to Rowena. She was covered in blood and sweat, her crimson gown ruined. Yet he had never seen a more magnificent warrior. He reached out his large, calloused hand, gently cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed a streak of soot from her cheek. "You saved my family," Cedric whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my bloodline, my mate." Rowena's breath hitched. "Your mate?" "From the moment I smelled lavender and pine in the stables." "Oh," he confessed, leaning his forehead against hers. "You are my Luna, Rowena. And I swear to you, I will burn this castle to the ground before I let anyone harm you." Bang, bang, bang. The heavy oak doors of the chamber shuddered violently. King Cedric opened the door. Alaric Harrington's voice boomed from the corridor, stripped of its usual smooth reverence. "We have received reports of a wild beast in the royal wing. Open the door, or we shall force it." Cedric and Rowena sprang apart. The infant let out a wail, startled by the noise. "He knows." Rowena breathed, panic seizing her chest. "Stay behind me. Protect Vivian and the boy," Cedric ordered. He did not reach for his broadsword. Instead, he cracked his neck, his bones shifting and popping with a sickening crunch. His golden eyes bled into a deep, luminescent amber. His fingernails elongated into lethal blackened claws. The heavy doors splintered and burst open. Alaric Harrington marched into the room, flanked by 6 heavily armed loyalist guards. The captain held a crossbow loaded with a silver-tipped bolt, aimed directly at Cedric's chest. Alaric's cold blue eyes swept the room, taking in the bloodied furs, the silver-haired woman holding the crying infant, and Rowena standing defiantly in front of them. "Well, well," Alaric sneered, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "It seems the rumors were true. Lord Arthur's lived to whelp his bastard, and Lord Buckley will be thrilled to know I have found his missing niece. 2 birds, 1 silver bolt. Treason is a terrible color on you, Alaric." Cedric growled, his voice distorted, vibrating with the monstrous power of the wolf beneath his skin. "It is not treason if I'm the one writing the history books, Cedric. Your reign is over." Alaric raised the crossbow. "Kill the women and the bastard," he shouted to his men. "Leave the king to me." The guards surged forward, drawing their broadswords. Cedric exploded into motion. He did not fully shift, but channeled the beast's speed and brutal strength. He slammed into the first two guards like a battering ram, his claws tearing through their steel chainmail as if it were parchment. Blood sprayed across the tapestries as Cedric threw them across the room. A third guard lunged toward Rowena. Without hesitation, she grabbed a heavy wrought iron fire poker from the hearth and swung it with all her might. The iron connected with the guard's helmet with a resounding crack, sending him staggering backward into Cedric's waiting claws. "Shoot him!" Alaric screamed, stepping back as his men were dismantled with terrifying ease. Alaric aimed the crossbow, waiting for an opening. Just as Cedric snapped the neck of the fourth guard, Alaric pulled the trigger. "Cedric, look out!" Rowena screamed. Cedric twisted, but the silver-tipped bolt grazed his shoulder, searing his flesh with agonizing, burning sparks. He roared in pain, dropping to one knee. Alaric drew a silver longsword, stepping over the bodies of his fallen men to deliver the killing blow to the wounded Alpha. "The Sullivan line ends tonight." As Alaric raised the blade, Rowena hurled the iron fire poker like a javelin. It struck Alaric squarely in the back of the knees. The captain buckled a cry of shock leaving his lips. It was the only opening Cedric needed. Ignoring the burning silver in his shoulder, Cedric lunged. His hand clamped around Alaric's throat like a steel vice. He lifted the traitor completely off the floor, watching the arrogance drain from Alaric's eyes, replaced by raw, suffocating terror. "The Sullivan line," Cedric whispered, his amber eyes blazing with lethal authority, "endures." Cedric crushed the traitor's windpipe and let the body fall to the floor. The remaining two guards, seeing their captain dead and the Alpha King covered in blood, dropped their weapons and fell to their knees in absolute submission. Silence descended upon the blood-soaked bedchamber, broken only by the soft coos of the newborn infant. Cedric slowly turned toward Rowena. The beast receded from his features, leaving only the exhausted Bleeden man. Rowena rushed forward, tearing a strip from her ruined crimson gown to press against his seared shoulder. "You are reckless," she chided, her voice trembling as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. Cedric smiled, wrapping his uninjured arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him. "And you, my Luna, have a terrifying swing. In the days that followed the Crimson Dawn, the kingdom of Oakhaven was purged of its rot. With Alaric Harrington dead, the traitorous guards were imprisoned, and Cedric's loyal forces seized control. Rowena's uncle, Richard Buckley, was dragged from his eastern keep in chains, stripped of his titles, and executed for the murder of Lord Thomas Coldwell. Rowena's family name was restored to honor, but she did not return to her father's estate. She remained in Castle Sullivan, no longer a stable hand, hiding in the hay, but the crowned Luna of the realm, standing fiercely beside her fated mate. Lady Vivian and the young heir, named Arthur, in honor of his brave father, were given the highest protection of the pack. The Alpha King had gone to the stables seeking a moment of peace. Instead, he found a war, a family, and a love that would echo through the history of Oakhaven for eternity. Did the Alpha King make the right choice by bringing his fated mate and the secret royal heir directly into the wolf's den? The treason in Castle Sullivan is only just beginning to unfold. If you want to see how Rowena survives the treacherous royal court and what happens when the pup is finally born, hit that like button, share this tale with your fellow fantasy lovers, and subscribe to our channel.